And
Good
I think we're
morning.
live.
Good,
Yes.
good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you happen to be, and welcome to the Groovy Podcast. This is episode 69, which you're supposed to go nice, right? I mean, that's the meme on any rate. Season
I
three,
can tell you what's nice about it is that it's the first episode of our third season.
right?
Can we made
Season
it to
three,
third season?
episode one. Yes, my name is Ken Cousin, podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut, and I am joined by my good friend.
I'm Baruch Sadogurski, podcasting from Sunnyvale, California. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Happy New Year. Did you have a good holiday?
Oh yeah. That was a lot of fun. We had some friends over. That was great. How about you?
Oh, good. I assume you didn't go anywhere. For you, a holiday is probably not traveling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It
Exactly.
was it
Yeah.
was great to be home.
Well, that's excellent. Is it sunny in Sunnyvale at the moment?
Now it is sunny, but we are actually under the freezing temperature at night.
Oh, so getting some cold weather.
30s, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay here. It's not bad. We've had some pretty warm days for here. I mean, not for you, but for relatively warm days. We're staying above freezing these days. Next week is I don't know if I told you, I'm actually on vacation next week, such as it is.
This is great. This is great. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I will be in, of all places, in Cabo, San Lucas, down in Mexico. There's a bunch of, there's several current and former no fluff speakers that take like an annual pilgrimage to a resort, and you know some of them. I mean, Jeff Brown will be there, and Mark Richards, and Scott Davis, and Neil Ford. You know, a few, and their spouses, of course.
Sun and sea. Best vacation ever.
Yeah, so I'm not supposed to do any work, but I mean, if I don't have a high speed internet connection, I just don't feel like I'm on vacation. You know, I need to keep up with email and Twitter and doing some writing, and so we'll see. Until my wife gets annoyed, then I'll see how it goes.
That sounds good.
So
That's
we
a good
needed to
plan.
squeeze this one in, our first podcast of the new year, to make sure that we didn't get delayed by more. And of course, we don't want to fall behind the Groovy Calamari
No,
podcast.
we
You know
can't.
what
We
happened
can't.
last
It's
month, you know.
war. I
Yeah.
I stopped you from playing the silly game last year, but now when we're all arrested and rolling ready, the flame is on.
Okay, so should we start with the releases? What do you think?
Yeah, let's start. Let's cover what's new, and there are some great new releases lately.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I mean, Gradle 5.1 came out this morning. I saw the tweet about it. I wound up installing it. I tried it on a couple of projects. Did run into an issue already, but on most projects it worked fine. The big thing in Gradle 5.1 is something that you'll probably want to talk about, is the fact that for a given repository now, you can specify which dependencies it contains using a pattern. You could say this includes certain repositories, or excludes certain, not repository, pardon me, includes or excludes certain dependencies. So this makes searching repositories a lot easier for Gradle because it knows which ones to search and which ones not to.
yeah. This is done for now when, especially in Android. Scene, we have multiple repositories back again as we had in
Mm.
Java 15 years ago. There are some artifacts which are in JSON, there are some artifacts which are in Maven Central, some artifacts which are in
Google.
Google Maven repository. They sometimes duplicate, and sometimes they are differ under the same coordinates, which is obviously bad. And once you specified which is the right one, you can actually say this artifact should come from such and such repository.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, again, you work for a company who deals with this sort of stuff all the time. Apparently, this has been an extremely highly requested feature of Gradle for many years, the ability to do some sort of filtering on repositories to say what dependencies are there or which aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yep.
saw a couple of tweets, Rolf Mueller, I think, I mean, several others saying this is something that they have requested over and over again for a long time, and they're very happy about it. So it looks like it's not a huge change over Gradle 5.0 other than that. That's the big change. There was another thing you could do apparently with the filtering. In addition to specifying a pattern for dependencies, you could also put in a Maven content block and specify the functions or methods releases only or snapshots only. Because of course many repositories are filtered that way, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
That looks useful as well. Beyond that, I was looking through the release notes. Whenever you, looks like I messed up. Something didn't render. I'll have to fix the rendering. Any rate, normally when you specify, when you say list Gradle tasks, when you run the task to see what all the tasks are in a particular Gradle build,
Yes.
then it gives you everything. And now it's a minor fix. You can put in -- group and wind up only seeing the tasks in a particular group as well. So
I would expect something that to happen since they have groups, and that's like forever. So it's kind of
so it's
added
easy
in
to do, very
5.1, but it's better late than never, I guess.
The other relatively big change seemed to be the idea of doing target architectures for C++ plugins. I bet I put the C++ in there. I can't believe it. It looks like I've messed up some of the ASCII doc. I'm gonna have to fix all that stuff. Any rate, for when you're writing with what they call native parts, the C++ or C plugins, now apparently you can specify the target machines property and specify which architectures you're using for a build. Yeah, in the ASCII doc it says C++, so I don't know why the pluses didn't get rendered. I'll have to see if I can fix that.
You can just write CPP.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I would have thought I'd put C++ in there, but okay. Yeah, I'll put CPP. What the heck? So that was another interesting feature. I know that their implementation of Gradle for native projects has been something that's undergone extensive revisions relatively recently. So that's we'll see how that plays out ultimately when they finally decide they want to make a big statement about that. I'm not sure when that will occur.
That's an extremely complicated domain, and obviously they need to make sure that they do the right thing before they announce it, because the community is also a little bit conservative, so they kind of a little bit stay away from this new and nice and shiny toys. And I think Gradle has one shot on it to make it right, and they need to be very, very careful about it.
I think they've always felt, though, that the native space is a space where Gradle has a lot to offer. That's something that is I guess you'd call it a target-rich environment, if you would, to see what is available out there. So we'll see.
I absolutely agree. The opportunity is there in terms of build tools per se. There is nothing much going on for I don't know how many decades. It's CMake and flavors of it. Dependency management, they are in a much better place. They have Conan, which is a decent good dependency management for C++. Build tools wise, they do have a great opportunity there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely useful. Of course, a lot's going to happen over there. I mean, I don't mean to jump around in our discussions, but one of the major pieces of news from Gradle came out this morning, right? Do you want to mention that? I'm talking about Andres.
Yeah. So this is very, very much related to everything we spoke about. Andres Almer, our friend, El Groovissimo, El Gradlissimo now.
That's right. He's not El Groovissimo anymore, is he? He's got to be El Gradlissimo.
El Cotlissimo.
Yeah.
joined Gradle as their second developer advocate very soon after Jan. And you know what? I'm personally super excited to see that Gradle now starts to invest more in developer relations, adding developer advocates, great people, both Jen and Andres. And yeah, so it's kind of interesting because at least me, I got this vibe from Gradle that they do actively step away from Groovy. And then with both hires, with both Jen and Andres, it's kind of conflicting messages because both of them come from Groovy community. So it will be interesting to see how Andres's activity in Groovy community will change, if at all, because of this move. And yeah, El Cotlissimo and El Gradlissimo, we'll see how that plays.
Well, I think they would object to the characterization that they've stepped away from Groovy. I think that while they're supporting Kotlin and they do favor it, I think that they would argue that they still are enthusiastic about Groovy. Now, whether their actions match up with that, again, I'm not sure. And certainly, though, bringing in, I mean, I think this is a major coup for Gradle. I mean, to bring in someone as high-powered as Andres Almire, to work with their developer relations, I mean, that's extraordinary. I was quite surprised to hear that. I think that's an awesome thing for them. And of course, Andres has so much experience and so much expertise in the Groovy world. That's got to help what they're doing there. That's got to have some influence on their connection to the community. I hope so. I mean, and of course, as you say, Jen's been working in the Groovy community for years and doing a lot of work there as well.
So we definitely, I'm very intrigued by this, and I'm looking forward to see what will change in both Andres' behavior or Gradle behavior, for that matter.
Well, somebody did tweet that they wondered how long it would be before Andres had to adopt Kotlin. I would put the over under at an hour. I mean, it's not that he'll give up Groovy, but I mean, Andres is the sort of person who could use multiple languages anyway. I'm sure he will also learn the Kotlin API and start working on that as well. The question is will there be feedback the other way? Will they take advantage of Andres' extensive experience in writing Gradle plugins and working with Gradle and use what he has learned inside the Gradle API itself? That'll be interesting to see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of course you know much more about the life of a developer advocate. I don't actually have that title, I guess, although I suppose as a one-person company I do everything. But
of course you do a lot of developer relations and you do them nicely, and you're just great.
Oh, well, gee, thank you, sir. But you actually have that job. I mean, you're a developer advocate on a regular basis, right?
Yes.
So why don't you say a few words? What do developer advocates, because I saw there was a nice little few Twitter threads that went on during December. I think you were part of one discussing what DevOps, or even more, not DevOps, sorry, developer advocates, what they actually do and why they matter so much. And, you've got this soapbox here. You might as well use it for a couple minutes.
Yeah, so I guess it's all about making developers more successful with the technology in hand. And this is something that all of us in the community do a lot. Like making developers successful with Groovy, for example, describes you perfectly. This is what you do. So for me, you are absolutely doing developer relations, and training is a very big part of it. Another one is writing blogs and doing podcasts, social media activities, obviously speaking at conferences, collecting feedback, being in touch with the community, building the community, improving how people feel about technologies. All that is actually what developer advocates do.
So Andres certainly has been involved in activities like that for years. So
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, that's a natural thing for him, obviously. We will have to talk to him, however, and find out what's going to become of El Groovissimo. That is, I agree with you, that's an important consideration there. And whether there will be an is it really, we're going to go with El Gradlissimo? Got to roll the R, right?
We will have to ask him because he cannot stay away from this question.
I believe he is scheduled to appear at DevNexus, which is another thing I did want to mention during the podcast, is that, again, just an extraordinary marketing coup, is that the DevNexus conference, which is one of the largest Java-based conferences in the country, in the US, is now this year DevNexus/2GM, Groovy, Gradle, and by golly, Micronaut. You know.
I think that's extraordinary because what we see in last years is that how Java conferences actually step away from Groovy, and you see less and less Groovy content in conference formerly known in Java 1, for example.
Mm.
So having Dev Nexus backing the Groovy community, this is great to see. It means that all the as usual the rumors about Groovy death are premature, and it's great to it's a great move. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the 2GM home part of DevNexus just to see what they have. And they've got pre-conference training on Micronaut from IoT to GCP, no less. So they've got Ryan Vanderwerf is going to be there, and of course Jeff Brown, but also Graham Roche and James Klee, and let's see who else. Venkat, of course, Venkat Subramaniam. But Venkat, I mean, being there, he could talk on anything, so you never know. But he's actually going to do a talk on Micronaut. Interestingly enough, he couldn't leave it alone. He's got a talk called Micronaut, the New Whiz on the Block, and then he's got a talk called Developing Micronaut Applications with Kotlin, yes. Venkat. Yeah. But of course, Venkat's working on a Kotlin book, so that's probably not really surprising,
Yeah.
But yeah,
and Venkat, he's Venkat.
Now you'll be at DevNexus, right?
Of course.
Yeah, I'm actually doing. Oh God, I shouldn't have said anything, should I? I'm doing a day-long workshop on Kotlin as well, actually.
You could just leave it out. I mean,
we were
so happy bashing Venkat for that.
They've got an old picture of me, which I hate to replace because, well, frankly, I'll just never have that much hair again. So it's kind of a shame to take that out. But yeah,
well, so as long as people will recognize you when they step into the room, it's all good.
Yeah. So, at any rate, so we'll have to do what we do normally. We'll see if we can do a podcast from DevNexus as well.
I think that was being tradition as well, and we definitely should do that. We will crash the night hacking stage and do a podcast there as usual.
That'd be a good idea. Yeah, it's just there's so many speakers, of course, just browsing through. I'm sure we'll be able to find some interesting characters for the podcast, but we definitely. Wait a minute. Andres, let's see. A. Almire. Of course, there he is. Yeah, of course he's there. What's he speaking on? Just to check here. Go Java, go. Java may be the king on the server side, but Go is the new upstart. Learn how to both languages can be combined to build better system. It starts already. He hadn't even joined Gradle. He's already talking about other languages.
I think that's kind of that since abstract before he joined Gradle, when he wasn't sure where he's going, and he was like, maybe I will do Go or whatever. Now it will be very clear. It will be Kotlin all over.
Well, I see you've got two talks. You got a Java Puzzlers, that's good, and a research study into DevOps bottlenecks. That ought to be interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's a good talk. Basically, we did a research among our customers, 5,000 customers. We picked the interesting ones, and we asked them what hold them back. And there are tons of interesting surprises, which is kind of a mix of very weird human psychology and actual DevOps bottlenecks. I mean, we heard people defending release cycles of like a year and saying that they feel great about it, all kind of weird shit. So that's a good talk.
Fascinating. I guess getting back to our releases, I mean, so the Gradle one was this morning. I knew that was coming because they go through a certain number of milestones or whatever, and then suddenly something appears, but I didn't know it was coming this morning. Groovy, however, had 3 different releases, actually, all of them relatively small. Groovy 2.5.5 came out, so that's the latest in the 2.5 chain, and they also are still doing maintenance releases in the 2.4 chain. So 2.4.16 is available as well. These both basically have bug fixes and small improvements, things like that. But of course, what I found interesting, and this happened, yesterday, the day before, Groovy 300 had its last alpha. So alpha 4 of that is now out. That's supposed to be the last alpha release of Groovy 3. And from now on, it's going to start moving to betas and moving us inexorably closer to the full release of Groovy 300.
And that's, of course, where the interesting stuff happens. Yes.
Yeah, that's where so many changes are occurring, and the parrot parser and everything like that is involved. We'll have lots to say about that as we get closer. We should mention, I rarely put it in the release notes anymore, but we should mention that, of course, these things are all available under SDK Manager, the wonderful tool. I should tell you, by the way, I don't know if I told you this, I have this client now that insisted I use Windows. It's like, I know. So I went out late last year and I got a Surface Pro 6, one of those Microsoft little boxes.
Yeah. I heard it's a good piece of hardware.
It's okay. I mean, it's still Windows. I mean, I get it, but it's all right. I do some writing on it. I do some coding for them. I did a training class for them with it. I would not use it as my primary computer for me, just because I'm not that wild about it. But what I did find, though, is I've been talking about that Scoop tool, SCOOP.
Yep.
It's an installation manager, much like SDK Man.
Yes.
And boy, that has been a lifesaver. That has been wonderful. I've installed multiple versions of, well, not multiple versions, but I've installed Grails and Gradle and Groovy and Kotlin and Java, multiple Java versions, as well as actual client-side software like Eclipse, and because that's the other problem with this client, they also use Eclipse. I know.
So you say there is live on Windows. That's what.
Yeah. So Scoop has turned out to be very interesting to me, but it still just reminds me how much I enjoy SDK Man and Marco. It's still Marco Vermeulen, right, who does all the work on that.
I didn't hear anything else. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't check, but I make sure it's important that we recognize him as often as we can, because he still does all that on his own time for free. And that's just, I find that extraordinarily generous, So the least we can do is mention him and just say thank you very much for what he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very important project. Has less to do with Groovy, but still it's a paramount for every developer, regardless of what language they developing.
Yeah, once he finishes rewriting that in, now it's different. Go is different from Golang, right? Those are two different languages. I don't know. I'm a little fuzzy on that. But at any rate, he's redoing it, right? So that it'll run cross-platform, and then we'll have SDK Man on Windows, because right now it's only really Unix.
Yeah, we got that there bunch of bash scripts, and I think Go is a good choice. Yeah.
So when that happens, we'll be sure to talk to him about it, to make sure that everybody's aware of it. But in the meantime, turns out Scoop is pretty good. Now, so that was Groovy. I do want to mention, by the way, that I did a podcast last week, with Peter Ledbrook. Or last month with Peter Ledbrook. That was really fun. It was great to catch up with Peter, but there had been no releases to talk about, significantly, certainly not in Grails. Within hours of us releasing that podcast, Grails released 3.3.9.
But you know what? Because you need to speak with me about the releases.
Oh, really? You're the one who knows about that?
No, you're the one who knows about that, but you only know about that when you are on podcast with me.
Oh, okay. I didn't get the connection there. All right. Well, at any rate, since we haven't mentioned it yet, we'll mention it here. Grails 3.3.9 is released. Now, more importantly, for my mind, Graham Roche and several others at OCI are now hard at work on Gradle 4. And I saw Graham tweet
Gradle 4, Grails 4.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, Grails 4, right. Hopefully we could talk to them about it at DevNexus. Actually, I intend to harass Jeff Brown next week when I see him. So what parts of
vacation? He will be more than happy to speak with you about work.
I'm sure he will be, drinking heavily, but we'll see what happens. Maybe that'll make him want to talk about all this. Okay. Which, of course, when Andres joined Gradle, that also reminded me. I've been thinking that all you have to do is be in the Groovy community long enough, and sooner or later you'll wind up working for either Gradle or OCI, one or the other.
Well, this is where apparently the companies who hire the most people, which is great. Talking about Grails and your comment about Eclipse, I don't think we have it in the show notes, but I think that Groovy and Grails toolsuit for Eclipse was released like today. Is it possible? I think so.
Grails tool support for Eclipse?
Yeah, Groovy and Grails toolsuit for Eclipse.
I thought that was
Yes.
done. Really?
Yeah, I think I was like extremely surprised. I think they released like today.
I just clicked on it, and I think I went to the Eclipse Marketplace instead of
Yeah,
going to the
that's I
actual
think that's the place. I'm looking there.
Thursday, January
January
3rd,
3rd.
409.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
was half an hour ago. I'm
Uh,
shocked. I thought that was dead.
yeah,
Um,
so I saw it and I'm like, well, I'm not sure. But yeah, looks like they released today.
Go figure. Look at that. Well, I'll have to try it out. I'll have to see how that's working of all things. Yeah. Well, thank you. Then we'll have to add that link to the show notes to put that in there. Thank you for noticing that one. Very good. I thought Groovy Grails Tool Suite was the one real casualty of Pivotal divorce. Pivotal leaving all that. Well, go figure. Okay, good. So maybe I'll try to say something about that by the next podcast whenever we do that.
I'm trying to see which version is it or anything. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
The
So
initial
let's.
details, the date updated I see here is what, like March last year, and I think the Eclipse versions are not that I know Eclipse versions, but it looked very old to me. So maybe it was just some automatic like commit to the website, and this is what triggered. I don't know. I don't even remember where I saw the notification about the release, but it's definitely
Yeah, this
interesting what
does.
changed.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find out what this really means and find out who's behind this. Who's actually working on this, because maybe we can get them to talk. Because there's still a lot of companies that are, kind of locked into Eclipse-based products, and it'd be good to know whether we have this available for them or not. So
Mhm.
we'll mention that this link is in there, and there was this update, but we don't yet really know what it means. On the release front, also, it looks like Geb came out with a new product. Geb
Yes.
2.3, I believe. I've got the release notes here. Oh, that was posted actually in the Google group for Geb. And Marcin Evman said version 2.3 of Geb has been released. And this is just from his post, apart from a small number of improvements and fixes, this release mainly consists of a large number of modules for previously unsupported HTML5 inputs, thanks to numerous contributions from Michael Kutz, K-U-T-Z. So great. I mean, we decided, as we determined last year, Geb is actually a very mature project,
Yes.
and therefore not evolving that quickly. But they saw a gap, and they've made some updates on that.
And I guess us mentioning it, that was because the release. I have no
I'm
doubt.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure we had so much to do with that. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's also possible we had nothing to do with that. That's the other option, I suppose.
Yeah, but we no, we won't go this path. It was absolute. This release was absolutely influenced by the Groovy podcast. I have no doubt about it whatsoever.
You remember how many listeners we have, right?
5.
We don't even know that anybody from Geb is a listener.
Yeah,
Anybody
no, we don't.
from Geb. So that. All right.
Well,
Anyway,
we are influential community podcast.
you know what? That reminds me. I read a very interesting article last year about so-called influencers on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And how much these people get paid to use some product in their videos and everything. And boy, we are missing an opportunity. I got to tell you. I mean, because
What do
all
you
we
mean?
need
You
to do,
didn't get the check from Jeb?
Not yet, not yet. No, I mean, did you get
I mean,
yours?
we mentioned their product last time. We actually forwarded, we enabled this release. Obviously, we should get paid.
Well, it
Absolutely.
should be direct deposit anyway. But yeah, but I mean, some of these people make millions of dollars. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And this was some woman in the fashion industry, I think, who was had a product go viral and then not. Or I mean, it was a crazy. I had no idea this industry of influencers on YouTube even really existed. As much time as I spend there now, I had no idea. Now, speaking of YouTube, hey, I've got a segue. Thought of a segue. Speaking of YouTube, one thing that GreatConf in Europe was doing last year in December is that as they built up to, I think it was December 25th, they were releasing a video a day from the GreatConf 2018 sequence. So I put a link to a handful of them. Paul King's Groovy Update, of course, because that's always useful to know. Alvaro Sanchez Mariscal doing reactive services with Micronaut. Marco Paz, who I don't know, talked about the Internet of Things, capturing time series data. Of course, Jen Strader talking about why use Groovy Lang, how to convince your boss and others. And Zach Klein, by the way, who you know, I'm sure. Zach Klein did a nice presentation on Room with a View, VUE, building Grails apps with Vue.js. But there's a complete playlist of 43 videos, and it was really a nice idea, I thought, that the GreatConf Twitter feed was highlighting a new one every day on the build up to the holidays.
Yeah, and we are now officially in the blog and other posts section of our podcast, for which I promise that the first blog and other posts that I will mention will be something new that it's called Tales from the Jar Side. It's so first of all, you bit me to it, and that was very neat trick of you to go through the YouTube influencers and what's not, just to prevent me for that. But anyways, Tales from the Jar Side is this new newsletter from an influencer in Groovy, Grails, and Kotlin community, someone called Ken Cousin. He does a lot of stuff. Some of it, as opposite to this podcast, is quite useful, and this newsletter is one of his most useful activities, and I urge everybody to go to follow the link in the show notes and subscribe to the newsletter Tales from the Jar Side. I think the first one is already out.
You say all this, but I didn't see you among the subscribers. You know
yes, that. And I know that I plan to subscribe, and then, as usually, got distracted. The good news are that using this opportunity, I'm hitting the subscribe button right now.
Oh boy. Okay.
We'll see if we can hear the notification of your inbox now live in the podcast.
Right. No, I have this.
I need to confirm that I'm human. Sorry, I cannot do it. There is we need to confirm that you are a human. I'm banned from subscribing to your.
Because you're not willing to check the box that you're a human?
Because I'm not sure I am human.
I'll vouch for you. Go ahead. Okay. It's all right.
All right. Thank you.
I'll let it go. It's okay. Oh my goodness. I have this nasty habit of, when I have too many things to do, my solution is to start another project. You know, it's just not a good plan, you know. I also am beginning to believe that I'm an actual writer, you know, as opposed to just a developer or a speaker or whatever. I actually do a lot of this. So I just decided that rather than do tweet storms, you know, just doing a whole series of tweets, I thought it might be fun to actually talk about what I'm doing and what's going on. Of course, it's from the company. It's Cousin IT Incorporated from the company. But since the company only has one employee, then it's going to have a certain focus on what's going on with me. I've got a big year planned, and I thought I would mention some of the things going on. But yeah, that's totally secondary to what we're doing in this podcast, you know, which also, of course, in the blogs and other posts was the comment about Andre Salmi-Ray at Gradle. So that's good. But the other one, did you see that little blog post that came out, was it today? again just a couple hours ago, saying Apache Maven support is coming to Gradle Enterprise. Did you happen to see that one?
Like no, I didn't see it. It sounds very weird, and I wonder what it means.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, first of all, for those listeners who don't, use all these products all the time, keep in mind there's Gradle.org and there's Gradle.com. And Gradle.org is the open source project, Gradle, that everybody uses and everybody enjoys. I mean, it's a nice, useful build tool. And then Gradle.com is the commercial side of Gradle Incorporated, commercial side of the company, and their primary feature is the product known as Gradle Enterprise. Gradle Enterprise builds on top of Gradle and has things like a distributed cache inside of it. It generates reports that shows the changes in builds over time. I mean, Gradle.org, the basic Gradle product, has build scans, for example. I've been using build scans now for years. And those are all hosted at scans.gradle.org. And a lot of people will say to me, yeah, I'd like the idea of doing a build scan, but I can't send my data out to Gradle. And I'm like, well, you're not really sending any data. It's just some statistics. Yeah, I know, but I'd rather have it in the firewall. Okay, well, that's Gradle Enterprise. I mean, that's one of their features. In addition, they also have a distributed cache that they can use inside the firewall too. So the results of one person's task can be used to speed up your tasks, for example. All those things on there. Why are you showing that? What does it say? You are now subscribed to Tales from the Dark. Yeah. Oh my goodness. At any rate, this blog post is associated with Gradle Enterprise. And it says, the title says by Eric Wendelin, who's the head of the developer advocacy team over there, by the way. So I imagine Andres and Jen probably both report to him. Says, Gradle Enterprise will soon support Apache Maven. Users will get faster Maven builds and fine-grained build analysis without having to migrate. So what I believe that means is that the distributed cache that Gradle Enterprise provides will now be useful inside of a Maven build, and that the build scans that they have as a fundamental part of Gradle will now also be available inside of Maven. They've got a little video here. I haven't watched it yet. It's very short, but they've got the 30-second video something. So I believe that's what's going on, and we'll probably hear more about it. Oh, there's a webinar about it on January 23rd. So there you go.
Yeah. So I guess they will have a Maven plugin that will provide distributed caches and build scans. We will see.
Yeah, I have. This really is cross-pollination. It'll be very interesting to see whether this provides the hook that many Maven people will need to switch over to Gradle ultimately. You know what I mean? If they start taking advantage of Gradle Enterprise features with a Maven build, will they eventually go, I might like to use... I mean, of course, the Gradle people don't care who's running the build as long as they're using Gradle Enterprise, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was
interesting what it will do, because it's a little bit different. As you mentioned, they're like two separate things. And not necessarily the benefits of Gradle Enterprise will contribute to the, I would say, embrace of Gradle as a build tool. I'm not sure we can do this assumption.
Yeah, you're right. I especially if they make the branch like this so that you can continue to use Maven builds and still take advantage of Gradle Enterprise features. Maybe this is just really good for Gradle, incorporated. I mean, rather than
the build tool. Exactly.
Yeah, we'll have to.
That's what I kind of feel, but again, I don't have any numbers or whatever to prove or disprove it. It's just my assumption that build scans and distributed caches are completely different from the paradigm shift that requires to go from Maven to Gradle.
Sounds reasonable. We'll see how that plays out. Of course, I just noticed you've got a Go T-shirt on, don't you? That figures. Okay, that was those were all the news items. I mean, again, it's the beginning of the year. Not a whole lot went on, but boy, we had a flurry of events happening today. We should mention, of course, in addition to DevNexus, the Great Conf call for proposals is still out, call for papers. The Great Conf in EU, which will be at the end of May. The call for papers deadline is the end of January. Meanwhile, the Micronaut Summit is going to be in April of this year. And of course, Greach 2019 in Madrid. Well, I didn't put Madrid on there. I should do that. At any rate, Greach is at the end of March, and their call for papers deadline is in about 10 days, I guess. So on the 14th of January. So definitely encourage people to take a look at Greach if at all possible. Are you looking at Greach, by the way? Agree. You thinking of that? Is that one going to be on your calendar?
I am not sure because it's kind of the beginning of the really, really hot season, and my calendar is already filling up for February and March and everything towards. So that will be challenging. Unfortunately, I cannot make progresses regarding to that.
Yeah, I have a similar problem. I have the No Fluff Just Stuff season, which starts at the end of February, has an event that weekend in Phoenix. And I've already scheduled for it, although I haven't committed to it. So I have to decide whether I can try to get out of that or whether they kind of want me to be there, So, well, keep an eye on my newsletter. I'll let you know.
Yeah. And we will.
Speaking of newsletters, the latest Groovy Calamari came out at the end of last year. And it was interesting because instead of being a technical newsletter, he said that, that once a year he likes to do one that is simply links to books that he enjoys. And he had something about a DevOps handbook, which you might like, and the complete Sherlock Holmes, which of course that's great, and a few others in there. So just good to know, and he's such a good source of information for our podcast, whether he means to be or not, that we should certainly mention it. I'm sure he will have some podcasts coming out in the near future as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that we have a Groovy podcast released in the new year, and I don't see Groovy Calamari released in this year. Someone is lagging behind.
We're ahead of them, huh? You realize that's a high risk. Picking a fight like that is you're not supposed to pick fights that you don't have a good chance of winning. You know what I mean?
What I can say is now we are leading, and I want to make sure that everybody remember this moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When we were in first. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to bring up? What are you doing these days? Do you have any conference or trips or anything JFrog related you want to market?
We do a lot of Go conferences this year, since we have announced a new kind of central repository for Go that should go live in the nearest future. So there is a lot of interest in Groovy community in kind of artifact and dependency management. They're just starting their journey there because up until very recently their dependency management was let's commit all our dependencies to source control. Now it's changing, and it's an exciting time. It feels like Java 15 years ago. So we do a lot of on that front, and also DevOps. So that there are events start to build up, and I'm really happy that I do have this Dev Nexus in the relatively short, like 2-month list, when I will be able to meet all of you, and it's feeling like coming home.
I think I didn't mention the dates of Dev Nexus. I should at least mention they are March 6th through 8th.
Yeah, that's exactly 2 months from now. 2 months.
And I think the 6th is the workshop day, and then the conference proper is the 7th and 8th, I think. But I'll have to check to be sure.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Yes.
Yeah. So that's down in Atlanta for those who are interested in that, and we'll definitely see you at that point. Yep. Okay. Well, how about that? We should, enjoy the fact that we are ahead of the Groovy Calamari podcast, right?
Yeah. I don't think it will last more than a couple of hours, but now we are in front.
Okay. It sounds good. So we will see everybody again in a couple of weeks or whatever, and we'll talk about that later. So thank you very much for being available. Good to see you again.
And thank you for bringing all the news and all the content. And we'll see you again.
Okay, well, take care.
Bye bye.